Hey guys, welcome back to my channel Abode of Learning. In today's video, I'm going to explain about levy of tax. Under this, I'm going to cover the topic schedules under supply, what they are, why is it important, I'll explain those. So yeah, let's get started. So, there are three schedules to explain what activities are considered as supply of goods or services. Schedule 1 deals with all those activities which are treated as supply without consideration. That means without any payment, if these activities are done, then these will be considered as supply of goods or services. Schedule 2 gives us actually clarification, or let's just say it classifies certain activities into goods or services. Schedule 3 explains about activities which are not treated as supply. Means this is basically the negative list. That means if you are supplying anything or if you are doing any activity that comes under Schedule 3, then there is no GST, or it won't be considered as a supply under GST. So, Schedule 1, activities which are considered as supply without consideration. What are those? Permanent transfer or disposal of business assets where ITC, that is input tax credit, has been availed. Means you are permanently disposing or transferring a business asset or selling off a business asset or just giving it away where when you purchase that asset you have actually claimed input tax credit. In that case, it will be considered as a supply. Second one is supplies between related parties or specified distinct persons. I'll explain what specified distinct persons or related parties are. Third one is gifts from employer to an employee which exceeds 50,000 rupees. Fourth one is supply of goods between principal and agent. I'll explain one by one what this means with examples. Permanent transfer or disposal of business assets where ITC has been claimed. Let's go one by one with the example. Mr. A purchased a furniture replacing an old one for business purpose. He has availed input tax credit on the old asset. He donated the old furniture to a trust. Is it a supply? Yes, it is a supply because Mr. A purchased that furniture for business purpose. He was replacing an old one, but he was using it for business purpose. First point is that. Second one, he has availed input tax credit. Means when he purchased that old asset, he actually took input tax credit. So these 2 points, it was a business asset, he took input tax credit. And third one, he's donating it to a trust. It doesn't matter what he does it. I mean, if he puts in a scrap or he's just disposing it off or whatever it is, this will be considered as a supply because he's permanently disposing it or transferring it to without any consideration. He's basically donating it, so there is no consideration there, so it is a supply. Now the second example is Mr. A purchased a furniture replacing an old one and sold it to another person. The old one was used for personal purpose. Is it a supply? This can't be treated as a supply because the asset was purchased for personal use. So this is not a business asset. And when you're using for a personal use, you can't take input tax credit. So both these key points are nullified here. So this is not a supply. Supplies between related parties or distinct persons. So who are known as related parties? Persons who are officers or directors of one another's business. Means let's just say two people are there, they are the officers or directors of one other business. Means Mr. A is partner or director of Mr. B's business, like that. Persons who are legally recognized partners in business. Persons who are employer and employee. Any other person, any person in the sense, any third person who directly or indirectly owns or controls or holds 25% or more of the outstanding voting stock or shares of both of them. Means a third person holding the control or owns 25% or more of the shares of these two peoples. One of them directly or indirectly controlled by a third person. Both of them are directly or indirectly controlled by a third person. Together they are directly or indirectly control a third person. They are members of the same family. So all of these, if any two people come under these categories or fall under these categories, then they are known as related parties. Means they can be employer employee, they can be directors of each other's business, they can be partners, they can be people who who have control on a third person, or who are controlled by a third person, or who hold or belonging to the same family, all of these are known as related persons. Now, distinct persons. Establishments of a person with separate registration, whether within the same state or union territory or in different states or union territories. Then these kind of people are known as distinct persons. Means though they have these establishments are of a one single person, they have separate registration. Even within the state, they have two different registrations. So these people will be considered as distinct persons. It's not just like different states, but within same state also, if they have separate registrations, then these establishments will be considered as distinct persons. Gifts from employer to employee which exceeds 50,000 rupees will be considered as a supply under this act. I'll give you an example. XYZ Limited is paying gifts to each of its employee. If it is capped, or if it is just 50,000 or up to 50,000, there is no GST on this amount. But if it exceeds 50,000, for example, in case 2 it is 55,000, then yes, GST is leviable because it will be considered as a supply. And the GST part or GST will be levied on the whole amount. It is not levied on just 50,000 but on the whole amount. Supply of goods between principal and agent. Principal and agent is basically like principal has some goods, he is giving out to his agent, and on his behalf agent will be selling the goods to other persons. Now, to decide whether it is a principal agent relationship, it is important to check who raises or on whose behalf is the bill raised by the agent when goods are being sold by him to another person. If the invoice for the supply, means the supply that happens from agent to a third person to another consumer, then if it is raised by the agent to its customer in its own name, if he is raising in his name, then yes, this provision holds. It will be considered as a supply. If the further supply is invoice of further supply is raised by agent in the name of the principal, then this provision does not hold. If the goods are procured by agent, means he is getting those goods or procuring it in its name, means in his own name on behalf of principal, then this provision holds. So basically, if he is selling goods and the invoice he raises is being raised from his name, like Mr. Agent is selling goods to Mr. Consumer, then this provision holds. If he raises invoice like Mr. Principal is selling goods to Mr. Consumer, then this provision does not hold. So understanding where or who raises the invoice or on whose behalf this invoice is raised is really important to understand this. Schedule 3. Activities which are not treated as supply, that is negative list. I'll explain schedule 2 after explaining schedule 3. So what is schedule 3? Schedule 3 consists of all those activities which won't be considered as a supply under GST. So what are those? The first one is services provided by an employee to his or her employer in the course of his or her employment. That means that person is very much a part of that organization, very much the employee of an organization, and whatever services that person is providing to that organization will not be considered as a supply under GST when that person is working in that organization. Second one is services provided by court or tribunals. Third one is functions performed by MPs, MLAs. Those won't be considered as supply under GST. Fourth one is funeral, burial, crematorium services, including the transportation of deceased person, means dead person. It won't be considered as supply under GST. Next one is sale of land. I have already explained that in the definition of goods, that immovable property, the sale or supply of immovable property won't be considered as supply under GST. I mean, even if you're purchasing or selling something, a land, it won't be considered as a supply under GST. Next one is sale of building. If consideration is received after issue of completion certificate, means the building is all built, then you are receiving the consideration. then the sale of that building won't be considered as a supply under GST. Next one is actionable claims other than lottery, gambling, betting. While explaining the definition of goods, I have told that lottery, gambling, and betting, these three actionable claims will be considered as goods under GST, whereas any other actionable claims apart from these three won't be considered as a supply. The next one is supply of goods from non-taxable territory to another non-taxable territory without goods entering into India. What does this mean? I'll explain with an example. So you are purchasing goods, let's just say you are importing goods from Singapore, okay, and that material is not coming to India. Before that only you are exporting that goods or selling that off to, let's just say, a seller in or a buyer in Australia. So the goods are not actually entering India. From Singapore it's going to Australia. So those two places are non-taxable territories for GST. So goods are not actually entering India. It's just it's a transfer from one non-taxable territory to another. So those won't be considered as a supply under GST. Next one is supply of warehoused goods to any person before clearance for human consumption. Also, supply of goods by consignee to any other person by endorsement of document of title to the goods, title in the sense ownership, after the goods have dispatched from the port of origin located outside India but before clearance for home consumption. I'll explain what this means. I'll give an example. Let's just say you are importing goods from Dubai and it has not reached the port yet. Before it reaching the port or before it reaching India, you are transferring the title of goods by endorsement to another person. Let's just say to one Mr. Harish, you are transferring it. So the goods have not reached India. It has left the port of origin, that is Dubai, and it is still in transit. Before it reaching India, you are endorsing the title to another person. So the transaction or this transferring of title from you to another person will not be considered as supply under GST. Okay guys, considering that this video ended up being a long one, and if I include schedule 2 it will be even more longer, so I have decided to make it into a separate video. So please check that out also. And thanks for watching. Please share your views, your suggestions, your feedback, and yeah, like, share and subscribe. Follow me on my socials. Links are in the description below. So see you later.